Hey there. How y'all doing this fine morning? This is Data getting ready to head back out on trail. It is 8:30, so I'm about an hour behind when I thought I would start, but I've only got 10 miles to go today. I took my time at the shelter this morning. The Cosby Knob Shelter is a really nice shelter. It's only a short distance off trail. There is a privy off the trail to the shelter, just about 50 yards to your left. The spring is about 10 feet beyond the shelter. The bear bags are directly in front of the shelter. It's got a nice view to the east, so I had a nice morning sunrise, which I probably already showed you all. I know I've said this before, but one of those things I really enjoy on trail is the morning after a big rain. It's not as if the forest isn't green enough as it occurs naturally, but it does love water. So right after a rain, everything is a little bit greener. Well, this is some kind of a fungusy growth on a tree that I don't think I've seen before. My day even gets to start off with a little bit of a view. There's my first blaze of the day. I have noticed that on this section of the Appalachian Trail, the trail clubs and the folks in the national parks seem to have fairly recently repainted all of the blazes, so they're bright white and shiny, which is, it's nice aesthetically. They're not needed very often, really. On the part of the trail that goes through the Smokies, it'd be hard to get lost on this trail. Everywhere there's a trail junction, there are signs about which trail you're crossing. There's water everywhere on trail right now because of all the rain. I'm fully loaded up with 2 liters. I've eaten most of my food, so I'm down to probably a 25-pound pack weight or so with water. It's only a slight chance of precipitation early in the day, so it's a little overcast right now, but it's actually of my 3 days on trail. This is day 3 of round 5 for this year for me. This is the best hiking weather I've had in 3 days, so I'm going to take my time. It is not likely I'll come this way again. I still intend to hike this whole trail. It's probably going to take me more than the 2 years I had hoped. Certainly more than 1 year. I don't see how people do through hikes. You come out and section hike for 4 or 5 days. That prospect of hiking this whole trail for months on end becomes all that much more impressive. So I guess this is my thank you to those people who've done that and videoed it, because I am applying a bunch of the things that you all talk about. So thanks for the lessons. And wouldn't you know, there's my second blaze of the day. Yeah, and I don't think there's any place between these 2 blazes that I could have possibly gotten off track, but thanks anyway for blazing things for us. There's another different kind of fungus growing on this tree. So these are kind of a little white flower that I found all up and down the trail this trip. And on one hand they look like they're spent, but on the other hand, as you can see, the bees clearly are still collecting nectar out of them. thought initially that might be some kind of viburnum the first time I saw it, but I don't think it is now. I think it's something else. But these little yellow flowers. I think I caught some of those yesterday, but big white things. The bees also seem to like those a lot. Walk around that very carefully. So I'm at the Low Gap Trail connection along the Appalachian Trail, and I'm hiking at about a 2-mile-an-hour pace again today without really working at it. That's probably partly owing to this downhill. I am headed to that Mount Kramer Trail connection in 2.1 miles, and I think it's uphill to there, and then that's it for my uphill for the day. But this is Low Gap is a nice little spot. Off in the distance there you might see those are some black-eyed Susans of the very tall variety. And some of those little white flowers, some different kinds of flowers. These little, these are the little red things. There's a great big butterfly that keeps requesting to be filmed. It's been flying around me. I'll look that up. He also seems to like those white flowers. I am kind of descending into a green tunnel. So the challenge there is if it were to start raining, I'll go to put the umbrella up. All these plants along the trail like to catch on that umbrella. I've been able to get through okay so far with it. It's been a real beneficial piece of equipment to have added, but I haven't had to go through dense rhododendron tunnels yet. So let's see. This is one of the sections of trail that's where you're hiking down, where I'm hiking down a little creek bed, really. So if it was raining today, I'd also have to be fighting the water and pools of water and stuff, slick rocks. But since it so far has not rained, this is just a bunch of loose rocks that I'm having to carefully climb over, which can be tricky, but it's not too tricky. So now I'm a little bit further north, about 2 miles south of Davenport Gap, and I'm on a part of the trail that I think, from some signs I saw back there, is a shared equestrian trail. And so on this hike, I'm learning that on the Appalachian Trail, when you're going through the Smokies, that if there's a trail labeled when you start doing your planning that says it's shared with horses, that is a good thing. In order to be shared with horses, it has to be that the grade is much more gentle and the trail is a fair bit wider, as you can see. It also means there's not so much, rooty, rocky, gravelly, rock scramble kind of things horses couldn't get over. It also means they cut back the undergrowth of the forest right alongside the trail, like right over here, much more than they do where it's just a hiker coming through for obvious reasons. This began, but this part of the trail, the last 2 miles south of Davenport Gap, so far is very nice. My pace has picked up, as you can see. Not nearly that kind of root and rock scrambly thing I was showing you all earlier. So I probably have about an hour to Davenport Gap at this rate. There's a shelter there with a water source. I'm going to take a shoes off, pack off break there, I think, and have a snack. I have a hot spot on my right big toe. I need to get some moleskin on. And then, well, there's Davenport Gap Shelter. It's 12:45. I'm going to have a pretty healthy break here, like 20 minutes, maybe half an hour. This is the only one of the shelters left in the park on the AT that still has this barbed wire anti-bear fence up on it. I guess, see, it sounds like from what some people say, they used to all have that. It's like a lot of the AT shelters in the Smokies. This one has a little eating porch with tables and benches at it. It's not very big eating area. And then it has an inside, like a gathering area with a fireplace on one side and a place to set stuff down or hang out on the other. And then it's got a 2-tiered sleeping area. And it looks like it's pretty watertight. So, well, I have made it to the north end of the Great Smoky Mountains National Park, as indicated by the AT Thru Hikers permit box. Now, I'm not a thru hiker, so I didn't have to do this, but if I were, I think what you're supposed to do if you're northbound is to put the other half of your permit in here. Now, I think maybe a lot of people don't do that, but since I was section hiking it, I didn't have to do any of that. There's the sign right there. But yeah, I think I'm actually technically still in the park for a little while, but I guess this is a celebratory moment. I have finished hiking the Great Smoky Mountains National Park section of the Appalachian Trail. And I gotta say, it was a doozy. It took me 2 different trips down here, and several gear changes, but it was a nice challenge. About a 6,000 foot, I think. These might be the last 6,000 foot mountains I climb until New Hampshire, I think. This is the Davenport Gap Road crossing, I think. My first little code of the trip, he just hopped right across the path in front of me, and trying to get my shoe in the shot. He's not very big. That's the end of my shoe there. He's a handsome light brown little fella. Now I'm hiking through the section that's between Davenport Gap and I-40 on my way to Standing Bear. And this is more what the Appalachian Trail is like from my experience through the 500 miles I've hiked. It's not nearly as rugged as it is in the Smokies. So I would say this, acorns are coming down like crazy. Enough that they're like little marbles on the ground. Got slipped on a whole patch of them back in the Smokies, so now I have a whole new hazard to look out for. Acorns. I've seen these purple mushrooms all over the trail this time. I think if anybody ever wanted to get a taste for hiking the Appalachian Trail, especially with some young kids, that this stretch between Davenport Gap, where there's a little parking area, and I think it's a state road number 32 on the south side, and then on the north side of it is I-40, and there's a parking lot at Watertown Gap. So this would be a nice place to go for a family hike. I want to say it's only a couple of miles long, maybe not even that. And it's gently graded, it's well maintained. But if you're just curious about what it feels like to hike some part of the Appalachian Trail, this would be a good place to come get a short taste of it some afternoon. I've come to a stream crossing, northbound, heading into the I-40 connection, Watertown Gap, and Standing Bear Hostel. And it's magnificent enough that it drowns out the sound of I-40 in the background, which was all I could hear a minute or so ago. Even though we've had a lot of rain, it's a pretty easy crossing today. A babbling brook here. A little cascading set of pools here. I've gotten to hike along the edge of this stream now for half a mile or so. This part of the Appalachian Trail just follows this stream right down out of the mountains. This whole segment has still been much easier hiking than any of the parts of the Smokies over the total of 6 or 7 days. Still, every one of those days was markedly more difficult than this. And I enjoyed that challenge of hiking through the Great Smoky Mountains National Park, but I can see why thru hikers rate it when they're done as one of the second or third toughest parts of the trail. And I'm glad to have it behind me. As this stream I'm hiking along flows ever downward, where it will, I'm sure, eventually dump into the Pigeon River. It keeps getting more and more tributaries added to it. Ends up forming a whole set of waterfalls. This is the next set of waterfalls along this creek, and I think it might be the last I can film because I can already hear the background. In the background I can hear the trucks on the I-40. I was wrong just a second ago because the Appalachian Trail turned and took me right across this creek again, right to the foot of these waterfalls. Ain't that a sight? So the trail changes direction here and goes across the street and over the Watertown Bridge and under I-40. A handwritten caution sign here about all of the heavy equipment that's operating on or near the trail and the roadway in this area. So I'm going to be extra careful here coming across the Watertown Bridge and under I-40. So I made it up the climb out of Watertown Gap parking across the Watertown Bridge, under I-40, and through this construction zone. But just as a heads up to other hikers coming this way, the I-40 construction site is still obviously a very active construction site, and recently there's been a lot of flooding on the road that gives road access up to Standing Bear and beyond. So there is construction equipment everywhere. This project is going to go on for a couple of years, and the blazing is in place all across the area, but among the things that have been damaged rather severely, I think by recent flooding, but it might have been by Helene, is the staircase that leads up from just north of the I-40 crossing back onto the AT. So it's in very bad state of repair. I would even suggest it's not safe. Hiking up this staircase, which is steep and made out of stone and not in good repair, was a little bit frightening. So one of the recent floods has washed out part of the banister that you would use to support yourself. So it's a hairy climb after a kind of a hairy crossing of a construction zone. So I just ran into my first two Sobo through hikers, a guy named Kaleidoscope and a woman named Bumblebee, and they're just, a couple hundred miles from being done now, and they were headed into town for resupply and probably hopefully a night in a hotel. I'm sure they, but I warned them about the construction site and all that stuff down there at Watertown Gap. But that does make 6 people I've seen today, so a little bit more activity than yesterday. Anyway, I got about 2/10 of a mile to Standing Bear, where I'll be hunkering down for the night. Well, folks, it's 3:30, and I made it to Standing Bear. It's about 2/10 of a mile up a path, and then this gravel road total. Right here, tucked in the woods, is the tree house, which is where I'll be staying tonight. That's the main house where the lady Maria who runs it lives, I think. Looks like they had some damage from the recent flooding also. Well, I got to Standing Bear Farm in good time, 3:30 or so. I fixed myself some chili, had a shower, I walked around and checked out the chickens, but also I checked out all of the storm damage that had been done by a bad flood they had just about 6 weeks ago. So the place is in a little bit of rough shape, but they're working hard on it. There were crews of folks working on the main house, on this gravel pad you see here, and on several other parts of the premises the whole time I was there. The only thing that affected me as a hiker was that their dryer had shorted out in the flood, so I wasn't able to dry my clothes in the dryer. In fact, that's some of them hanging on the railing right there. They did eventually get dry enough to hike in, but Maria and her whole team were very welcoming. They had good resupply and helped with some advice on a couple of things. And all in all, it was a good stay. And the treehouse is actually a pretty cool room to stay in. So with that, this is Data saying happy trails to
I
each
would
of
say, they've been through a lot recently, but they're still taking in gas.